Greetings, loved ones. Welcome to the first unofficial Spilo Clips video. We're going to be putting a lot more of my etc. content on this stuff, whether it's just a quick low-effort breakdown, chops of stuff that we've done on stream that doesn't deserve to be in the main channel, and a lot of high-end etc. content, including a Sekiro video and some other game analysis, maybe even some workout stuff. Basically, this is going to be the channel where all the fun stuff gets posted that doesn't need or demand a lot of editing. And we're going to start off today with a quick updated guide at Season 19 perks. If you guys didn't see, I looked at these on stream yesterday, but I kind of want to do something a little bit more cohesive where I actually give my actual recommendations that are updated for Season 19, because we just released a perk guide, and obviously with a couple of these tweaks, I do think some things have changed. From my original perk suggestions from heroes that were not changed to Season 19, I actually don't think that there's a whole lot of suggestions. Like, there's a couple of like disclaimers, like I learned that the Moira burst heal orb does not apply twice on bounce. And there's a couple of other things as well, but to be honest, nothing that's major enough for me to change my recommendations altogether. And so we're just going to jump into the changes that are applicable to Season 19. That's going to start off with Doomfist. So basically the change to his perk from the Season 19 patch was we're basically changing the duration of the slow. And then how much you're actually being slowed for. So you're going to be increasing the amount of slow duration for half a second and the amount of the slow for 10%. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, like, this one is a pretty significant change, one of the most significant perk changes that we have. So much so that if there isn't a specific cooldown that you're eating with Matrix, like Sleep Dart, Cast Hinder, or whatever, you basically should be choosing this 100% of the time. I've played up against this a couple of times just in the last day or so, and it's actually remarkable how much more consistent follow-up punches and follow-up shots are. It makes me feel like I'm playing versus old Overwatch 1 DPS Doomfist at some situations. And so the slow is significant. Choose this perk unless there's really something important that you need to be chewing down or eating. Now, one of the benefits of Power Matrix is still there, which is that it does remove all of the damage. So if you're eating a lot of burst damage, it's just going to absorb all of that damage, whether it's CC or not, which definitely helps keep your HP high. But if we're talking about like lethality increase, Aftershock is going to be way more consistent if there isn't that CC. So I think it used to be that Power Matrix was so good that you'd only choose Aftershock in like very, very niche situations when you weren't really being focused at all, even if there wasn't any CC. But now I think things have kind of slid to the other way. I think Aftershock is probably more of a 50-50 where it's like, do I need the CC immunity? Do I want the slow and slam? Now it actually feels like an actual 50-50 choice right now, more so than it was before. We're going to move on to Hazard, and this is going to kind of start a theme here, and this is going to be a much faster video than I think some of you guys are going to realize, because one of the themes of a lot of the perk tweaks on Season 19 were things that didn't really address the fundamental problem with the perk, and the fact that it just wasn't a really good, conceptually good perk design for the way the gameplay of the character works. So I'm not just critiquing it from a gameplay balanced design perspective, just even from a strategic win the game choice, it just doesn't do enough to change how you play or to make it more justifiable over the other one. And Hazard's really the first one that's going to fall into this line, where they just really missed the mark. They increased the lifesteal 25 to 30% on his block. It's bad. It's like 5 healing per second more. It's significantly worse than the range increase. It doesn't address the fundamental issue with this perk, which is that we don't need more reasons to block. We need different reasons to block, or just something else entirely, and just don't ever pick this perk for any reason. It's terrible. They would have to literally tweak this to like 40, 50, 60% for even to be remotely viable compared to the range and the speed that he gets from his other ones. So just, it's bad. Don't choose it. Jungle Queen no longer refreshes all cooldowns with her shout or with her ultimate. It does give you the invulnerability, but it just reduces the cooldowns by 6 seconds. And I think this is actually a really good change that they did. This is one of the ones I think they really nailed, because it's still a really good perk. It's still one of those ult perks it's probably worth picking most of the time. But you kind of see what I'm saying here. Like, you're going to get a refresh on your ult 100%, but you're also almost 100%, sorry, on your knife, but you're almost certainly going to get a refresh on your Carnage, but it's not a guaranteed refresh on your shout by any means. So basically you get a significant cooldown reduction on your Carnage, you get a guaranteed reset on your knife, and you get a lower cooldown on your shout. So it feels like a bit of a better balance here. Now, would I ever choose Battle Shout in the situation where I get a reload and I get more reload for my allies? No, almost never. Basically, in situations when you're playing fully grouped with your allies, like let's say you're playing like one of those old Junker Queen Goats comps with like Lucio and Brig and Genji, maybe this is worth situationally picking because it is a neutral perk that's going to help you in multiple fights, whereas this one is an ult one. But I still think this one is better. I just think that it's going to be more like 90-10 rather than literally 100% all of the time. And it also is a slight nerf to the character that I know we all love Jungle Queen, but I do think she was a little bit overperforming just a wee bit. And this allows her to ult to be consistent, but not consistently oppressive in those situations. So this one was a good one. Rhine one, I mean, it's the hazard thing. They basically increased the barrier shield regeneration on the crappy perk that replaced Crusader's Resolve by 50. Is it the perk to choose on wide open maps? Yes, it's still going to be the perk to choose because refunding when you stun an enemy for Fire Strike, it's not good on wide open maps. It's okay in narrow maps, but it's just such a crappy perk. So yeah, you're going to be choosing this perk in the exact same situations that you were before. Zero change whatsoever. They're just doubling down on a really poorly designed perk. I love you, Custa, but this one just hasn't done what it's intended to. And the more that I've played Rhine and played versus Rhine, the change, the difference, the decision making isn't palpable, and it's just completely unfun. So this one doesn't change. The same situations, more open maps. When you pick the perk originally, it's the exact same thing here. Wrecking Ball. This one is kind of interesting. So basically, they just buffed the overhealth one, the adaptive barrier one, which is the block one. And I'll give you guys the visuals for it because that's the biggest thing that's changed. It's not just the fact that it got buffed where he keeps more shields because that's big, but it's also freaking honking huge. So you can block all sorts of stuff with this. But I will say it is easier to shoot. So it is going to break a little bit faster, but there is no penalty anymore. So I would say this really doesn't change anything that you do with Wrecking Ball. You're still going to pick the perk in the exact same situations. When you're playing versus heavy CC, it's going to be really good. So I think this is a minor buff to this perk because of the quality of life of just being able to maintain more HP. That's basically all there is to it. There's nothing really more to add to that. It was already, I think, a pretty close call with Wrecking Ball. I think the Pile Driver one was always slightly better because you always kind of have that inherent capability of outplaying CC, but now that's going to feel a little bit better versus those heavy CC comps. So I don't think this changes really much, but it just maybe makes it a little bit more consistent. Cassidy, High Noon perk. I like the idea of this perk, but it just doesn't, it feels like one of those ult perks that just can't possibly be good enough to compete with Bang Bang, which I think is one of the better minor perks. It's been buffed from 20 to 30. Don't pick this perk ever. I mean, there just isn't really any situation to pick this perk. It's not good. It's not useless. It's just useless in comparison to Bang Bang, and buffing it to 100 health per second probably still wouldn't be good enough for this perk. It's just not good enough. Freya, Relentless Barrage. Refund on ammo is going to be increased from 4 to 8. This is going to be probably the perk that I'm the least sure on, because that's going to be, let's see here. So you're basically doing that instead of aerial recovery. So basically aerial recovery is going to be consistently the better dueling perk, like when you're fighting or getting dove or whatever. Like 30 health per second is a lot winning 1v1s. But now Relentless Barrage, it just means that you barely ever reload if you're just tank spamming. Like you just have infinite ammo. Now, is that enough to choose this perk all the time? No, dueling is still going to be the primary focus from Freya, but are there situations when you're playing versus a tank like Malgo Roadhog where you just want to turn your brain off and burn them alive? Well, this perk was already okay in those situations before, and now it's actually pretty solid. So there are going to be some niche situations where it actually makes sense to pick this perk overall. I'm a big fan of the ult perk. Obviously, that one was my brainchild. I just think the problem with the ult perk of speed boost and slight healing over time, it's just not good enough to make the power perk powerful. And in our current power crap perk state, having significant cool changes to your ult isn't good enough. Either needs to make your ult completely insanely strong, or you need a neutral thing. And right now, Glacial Propulsion is kind of that neutral thing, because now it no longer steals the cooldown on your wall. So it was, I think, a relatively good change. I wouldn't have minded if there was a cooldown on your wall, but obviously it was too harsh. And again, the problem with May's perks is that they're way too punishing in comparison to the other perks. In a vacuum, I like May's perks a lot. There's minor perks, but the problem is that you're competing versus ridiculous things like Tracers and Junker Queen ults and things like that it's not balanced. So for right now, probably going to prioritize this perk most of the time whenever verticality is relevant. And I actually think that there's situations when verticality isn't relevant that it's still going to be decent, because there's all sorts of peeker's advantage things that you can do. In sniper duels, you can peek around corners and do little goofy things like that might actually still be better than the ult perk, sadly. Okay, Reaper's one. Reaper got a huge shakeup, and it's so strange. Obviously, this goes without saying, don't pick Soul Reaping. It's a joke. I cannot believe they left this in the game. But Lingering Wraith is really good. This is the new one. Basically, Wraith is a little slower, which was certainly a balanced choice of all time. but now you're insanely fast after leaving Wraith form. This is really good for offense. This is really good for defense. Always pick this perk. And frankly, I think the same thing applies to Dire Triggers and Shadow Blink. Shadow Blink is too consistent. It's too good. It's too flexible. You're probably going to be choosing Shadow Blink about 90% of the time. Dire Triggers is fine, and I liked it as a flexible ranged option. And I'm actually kind of sad that it's competing with Shadow Blink now, because now what was a relatively transformative and interesting perk is now going to be basically never be used. Maybe the situations in wide open broad maps where Shadow Blink isn't good enough, but it's so freaking fast that like I just don't see you choosing anything other than these two. So maybe it's a nerf to Reaper overall with the Wraith stuff, but honestly it feels like they made the perk choices with the majors just like pretty dumbed down, and they replaced the wrong perk, which was certainly a choice of all time. So basically always choose those two almost without exception. Tracer, so I'll demonstrate this one as well. Basically they found a way to drag out the value of the major perk without significantly nerfing it. And what this means essentially is that if I use all my blinks, I recall, blink, 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 it ends up being about the same amount of blink charges as a whole, but it means that you can't degenerate the blinks immediately. So if a Tracer uses recall, there is a brief window of time where she's a little bit more punishable than she was before, although the in total amount of blinks is the same. It's just not immediately front loaded. So it's a much, I think, better balanced decision, because you're able to punish the Tracer with a little bit more consistency without making the recall perk bad. Now, to be clear, it's still no contest. It's still insanely more consistent than Quantum Entanglement, and sadly that perk will still be in the gutter because we didn't fundamentally deal with why recall and blinks are so good. So it's a step in the right direction, but there's still no competition with this perk whatsoever. And the same thing goes with the Venomine one, which is insanely funny because they've actually doubled the damage that the Seeker Mine does, but the problem is that it's still ridiculously easy to break. And because Venomine does significantly more damage, what is it, 125? Yeah. It's now been buffed to where now you have even less reason to choose this perk, because the base Venomine does half the health pool of 250 HP targets. So why on earth would I choose a 50 DOT Venomine for scouting when the original Venomine already does that? So it's like I think the concept that I was talking about on stream yesterday is that it's like that they don't want people to be trashing the game because they accidentally chose the wrong perk, but they don't have development time to actually fix the problem. Moving on, Ana. So the crit perk was always an awkward one for me because it felt like it should be good, but it felt so unintuitive to the muscle memory of Ana. But now we kind of have a situation where, like, honestly, maybe your muscle memory can just go and jump off a cliff. Because to be honest with you, Headhunter now does 200%, and guys, we're talking 150 damage for headshots. For context, that's the same amount of damage, I believe, as an Ashe headshot, and you could do it unscoped with no fall off. So your muscle memory is going to be taking a ride here, because now it's absolutely worth trying to tweak things and make this work, because guys, this is insane for breakpoints. There's so many characters that you can actually kill now. You sleep a Tracer, she's freaking dead. That's the other thing too. Slept targets are under extreme danger here. So for context here, it used to be that you couldn't kill a Tracer before she could recall, because even with shot and nade, she could still be able to recall in time, because the shoot nade melee isn't all at once. There's a slight delay there. But now, just sleeping a Tracer and shoot melee, she's freaking dead. If you sleep, let's say, a 250 HP target, bam, slept, right? Shoot for the head, nade the body, where's the nade? And this person's 1 HP with 1 melee, right? So there's all sorts of breakpoints. If we do the same thing with Reaper, if I sleep a Reaper, shoot for the head. Even with lifesteal now, if I hit one more shot on his head, or even one more shot in a melee, he's dead. There's just so many more breakpoints that are applicable here. Now, this one is bugged right now. Actually, the Tracer one's bugged as well, toward Tracer's recall. The cooldown affects a recall that should be fixed soon. And this one means that you're able to skip the tank passive, so it's slightly more strong than it should be. But basically, any situation when you aren't being dove 24/7, it used to be that, like, in certain sniper situations, the Ana headshot perk is better. Now it's like, yeah, actually, we're bending the rules now. Like, unless you're being pretty consistently dove, or you're getting rushed on, then you probably shouldn't be choosing bouncing nade. You should just be choosing the headshot perk, because your lethality is going to go through the roof. The problem with major perks when I've tested them is that I don't get them until it's kind of too late. But I've picked this perk in 3 or 4 different games, And every game I've picked it, it's had immediate impact on the one fight I hit. I literally would hit like one headshot by accident and somebody would die. Or that damage would lead to a really important cooldown being forced. Or I would be able to hit 2 shots in a Sigma and then force both his shield shift. He has to back up. So it's just like all of a sudden things are happening because I'm hitting 1 headshot or 2 headshots. It's kind of similar to bouncing data in that aspect, but it's way more consistent, ironically, with that value. So it's kind of broken this perk a little bit because of the breakpoints here. BAP, I'm going to be honest with you guys, the same situation in which you choose the Assault Burst, which was when you're not really moving at all, you're still going to choose that, but now you're basically having no penalties. So I still like the dash perk better, I think, because it just allows you, like, mobility is just so much fun. Like, it's so good as well, even if you're not being dove. But yeah, even though the attack speed has been nerfed slightly, you can keep yourself alive in a lot more situations now. So I would say that this one is a little bit more nuanced than it used to be before, but you're still probably going to be choosing the dash perk. EDRE. I have a lot of thoughts about this one. This one's going to remain, it's going to need testing. Let's put it that way. So my opinion here may be wrong, but this is just my initial take. I think this one, the problem with Solar Flare is basically you're going to use, even 2% of your resource is going to give them that burst heal, that flat 100 healing. So what you do is you heal until you're out of resource, and then you do burst heal for 100. So it does not scale to how much resource that you have. It does the same amount of healing no matter how much resource you have. So in the same way that you use like a Zarya's alt fire at the end of your clip to kind of min-max things, you can kind of min-max this perk by completely draining your resource on one target, which, by the way, is insane healing, right? We've already talked about that. It's insane healing. And then right when you're about out of resource, there's your burst heal. Now, the problem with this is that one of the big things that you're not supposed to do with EDRE is you're not supposed to use all of your resource, because that does put your heal on a significant cooldown, more so than draining your resource low. So this remains to be tested. How forgiving and how often is that cone of healing going to be useful? How good is it to completely drain your heal resource? Is there some way where you can min-max it? Is it worth to drain your heal resource in those situations? This one could be good, I think, especially considering her other major perk isn't like exceptional. It's solid, but it's not like earth-shattering. So this one really remains to be tested. My major concern is going to be more about the delay before you heal. So watch. That little delay right there, is that too much to really justify it? Is it too punishing to run out of heal resource? And is the cone or range of this burst heal just not good enough, considering that EDRE is more of that medium range support character? So I'm still skeptical of this perk as a whole, but it remains to be seen. Last couple, we've got a few here. Kiriko, Foxtrot got nerfed. Ready Step got buffed. I still think Foxtrot's better because it better, again, mimics the gameplay loop of what you should be doing with Kiriko, which is either choosing yourself or teammates, and then those heroes get an offensive and defensive advantage. Whereas Foxtrot kind of has you getting the value by moving to, Ready Step is I use my Swift Step and now I'm more effective, which is like fine, but a lot of times the Swift Step is you're getting out of jail, and very often do you use your Swift Step into significant action. It's usually the action that happens before the Swift Step, so it doesn't really follow her gameplay loop very tightly. So I'm probably still going to encourage Foxtrot, but I also do encourage a little bit more experimentation with this. Life Weaving, so this is the perk where you use your dash and your next heal does a little bit more. I still kind of like this one slightly better over Cleansing Grasp, because Cleansing Grasp doesn't apply to a lot of things that it should, and is obviously pretty inconsistent in value. So if there is something that is consistently burning your team, consistently nading your team, it's still a fine perk, but otherwise Life Weaving is going to be doing a little bit more consistent healing and having small impacts frequently over the course of a fight, especially if you're not under pressure a lot. So his minor perks still suck, but this one is, I guess, a slightly more appealing than it was before. And finally, we'll talk about Wuyong here. So I'm not going to go super in-depth in Wuyong because I think that there's still like a lot of controversy about like Tri-Shot and the value of Tri-Shot. Obviously, Ultraviolet manages to get a lot of value out of that perk, even though I'm not a huge fan of it. But one thing I will say is that they did change the Overflow, which is the minor perk that nobody chose, to where you get more healing resource for using your shift. The problem, again, is that this completely misses the point of why Overflow was bad. It wasn't that it wasn't good because resource, it's just the fact that having to use a mobility cooldown and having that tied to your gameplay loop besides just moving is awkward, clunky, and not intuitive. And so right now, even though they've nerfed the balance, which gives you passive healing, and they buffed this, I still am not going to encourage players to choose this because it forces you to do a management of your mental resources that isn't intuitive with the gameplay of the character. Now, is there a chance that they just have made it so strong that maybe it's decent enough in certain situations to pick, even if it is clunky and awkward? Sure, but I doubt that's going to be the case. I might be wrong. And I also don't encourage players to get into the habit of thinking about their shift as a resource meter, because the situations where you're like, I don't need my shift, well, then you probably should be taking a deeper angle anyway and not thinking about dumping more healing into your tank. The way that you alleviate pressure on your tank when you're not being dove is to take more aggressive off angles, 225 HP or not. The solution to helping your tank isn't to use your shift to just heal more. That's just putting out fires with a thimble. It's not going to be good enough, even with 50 more healing resource on a relatively broken healing ability. Now, moving off of that, finally, we'll talk about Wave. Wave did get the nerf that it deserves, and I'm glad that it got the nerf. I hate that it's 14 seconds, of course. People could go on that all day long, but the rewind healing has been reduced. So instead of doing 80 healing on, on the reverse, it now only does 40. So it's 80 healing out, 40 healing back. And that's most important for its use as a defensive cooldown, which means that it's a much more balanced perk, which I think it was generally going to be better in a lot of situations, even over Tri-Shot. But I think now it becomes a little bit more tricky because it's a little bit more balanced as a defensive cooldown in a 1v1. So I could see situations where Tri-Shot is a little bit more consistently picked. I still need to study. I think we'll be doing that later this week on like why Tri-Shot is being used by Ultraviolet. I think it's just going to be more of a situational thing, but yeah. Okay, that's about all there is to it. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments. I don't really think that there's anything else here that I would adjust from my initial advice. There weren't that many changes, surprisingly, in a lot of other perks. Yeah. Cheers. And also subscribe. We're going to be having a lot of new crap like this coming out in the future, and so stay tuned.